Gorilla versus polar bear. Who would win? Forget about a gorilla versus 100 men. A gorilla would destroy a human. He'd just have to do it 100 times. Let's talk about a fair fight. Let's give the gorilla an adversary that's large, maybe one of the largest adversaries we could match him up with, a polar bear. The gorilla and the polar bear are both at the tops of their games respectively, so if we matched them up against one another, who would win in a fight? Want front row seats to the gorilla versus polar bear matchup and others? Subscribe so you're first to see how every matchup goes down. What do they look like? Humans go crazy trying to formulate ideas as to how a group of them could take down a gorilla. They wonder how many humans would be needed to defeat a gorilla. A dozen? 2 dozen? 100? In the end, we're unsure how many it would take, but the number isn't one. It's a large number, and that's because though humans are advanced apes, they are far from being top ape. That title belongs to the gorilla, the largest living ape in the world, and it's not even close. Some humans exceed 6 feet tall. The largest gorillas, silverbacks, they can be 6 feet 5 inches. Sure, a human may be that tall, but are they going to weigh 450 pounds? Of course not. A gorilla's punch could shatter a human skull with one strike. It isn't just about the fact that they're 2 times or 3 times the weight of a human. Their muscles are far superior. They have the fast twitch muscle fibers that we don't, so a swing from a gorilla would happen in an instant before you could even react. Those fast twitch muscles are similar to that of the ambush predators of lions, jaguars, and tigers. Gorillas have dark hair all over their bodies, some subspecies getting brownish-reddish hair on their heads, and of course, there are the aptly named grey-haired silverbacks. Those are the largest of all. Now, you want to talk about large, then let's talk about the polar bear. The gorilla may be the largest ape in the world, but the polar bear is the largest bear. And that's no small feat since there are some big bears out there. The polar bear is also the largest land predator, bar none. A polar bear will reach over 9 feet in length easily, sometimes longer than 10 feet. They'll be 1,200 pounds, and in some cases even closer to 1,700 pounds. They have thick bodies that keep them protected from cold environments, but they're full of muscles themselves. Muscles that are capable of lifting and dragging prey like walruses, 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. Muscles that allow this large land predator to run 25 miles per hour on land and swim 6 miles per hour in the water. Polar bears are a magnificent blend of power, speed, and agility. Their whitish fur blends in with their surroundings, and their build is a bit more slender than that of their cousin, the brown bear. Polar bears have wide paws that have adapted to being able to traverse ice and paddle through the water well. Is that important for the polar bear? You better believe it. He deals with a lot of ice and water. Where do they live? The polar bears deal with so much ice and water because of where they live, the Arctic. Contrary to popular belief, polar bears do not also live in Antarctica, only the Arctic regions. The northernmost regions of Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Norway, and Russia, 70 degrees north and above. You'll find them in coastal regions, but they also spend much of their lives on sea ice. They wander the frozen tundras of the Arctic, and they actually spend so much of their lives in the water that they are technically considered semi-aquatic mammals. A tundra is a cold, tireless biome. You couldn't find a more opposite place when you dive into the places where gorillas live. First, gorillas are only found on the continent of Africa, countries like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Rwanda, Uganda, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Cameroon, and several others. The polar bear's habitat is treeless, but the gorilla's habitat is replete with trees. Gorillas are found in forests throughout these regions of Africa. Mostly you'll find them in lowland tropical rainforests, but there are also populations in montane forests and also bamboo forests. Regardless of what kind of forest, the gorillas live amongst the trees, and their homes are situated either on the equator or very near the equator, meaning they live in heat and oftentimes much humidity. What do they eat? So, if the polar bear and gorilla live worlds apart, are their cuisines that different too? The answer to that is yes, and for a variety of reasons. Let's start with the gorilla, living on or near the equator in Africa. He's huge, muscular, Your first thought might be that he gets ripped eating a lot of animal meat. Not at all. A gorilla might never touch any meat in his life, and if he does, it's probably just insects, and a very small amount of these very small animals. Some gorillas will have about 1% of their diet consisting of insects. Gorillas fall somewhere between being herbivores and frugivores for the most part. Western gorillas are seasonal frugivores, meaning when certain fruits are in high abundance, that's the diet. The mountain gorillas in the east only eat 3 different kinds of fruits because there aren't as many available at those high altitudes. However, the rest of the year for the western gorillas, and for many of our other gorillas, they'd be better described as herbivores. Yes, they eat fruits, but they also eat a lot of leaves, stems, roots, and bamboo shoots. The western lowland gorillas eat around 97 different species of plants, whereas the mountain gorilla in the east eats around 142 different plant species. All in all, it's a plant-based diet for all gorillas. Now, for polar bears, not only is the terrain and the food offered vastly different, their diet is completely different anyway. Polar bears are carnivores, so they are not worried about what plants they can find in the Arctic. Polar bears will eat ringed seals, bearded seals, harp seals, hooded seals, and harbor seals. Clearly, they like seals. A gorilla in Africa has no idea what a seal even is. Polar bears will also eat walruses, narwhals, and belugas as well, though they're much larger, so that is only on occasion, when they're able to track down a meal that big. Polar bears are also the most carnivorous of all bears, seeing as how there isn't an abundance of plants and berries around for them to feast on, like the grizzlies and black bears farther south have at their disposal. It's a small percentage of vegetation and kelp that they include in their diet, and sometimes they can catch reindeer, birds, and fish, but to reiterate, the polar bear loves seals. That's the bulk of their meals. How do they behave in the wild? So, how's a polar bear catching all these seals? And what's a day in the life of a polar bear like? Well, when hunting, polar bears may find a seal laying on the sea ice, so they approach slowly, head lowered, hiding their dark snout and eyes, so only the white of them blends in with the snow. Once they're close enough, they charge, attempting to catch the seal before they hop into their ice hole. Or they may approach from the water, only their nose exposed, and then lunge onto the sea ice before attacking. If the seals are already hidden in their lairs under the ice, the polar bears may approach quietly and then smash through the ice with their powerful paws, breaking into the lair and taking the seal out. Male polar bears tend to live solitary lives. However, if it isn't breeding season, they're quite tolerant of being in the presence of other males. Mothers travel with their cubs until they're closer to adulthood, and sometimes several bears may be traveling together, including mating pairs, and sometimes finding other mother-offspring groups to form composite families. Now, a gorilla family or a troop has a well-defined structure. A gorilla troop could be anywhere from 3 to 10 to even more individuals. It will usually have one adult male, the leader. He is the silverback, characterized by the silver stripe of hair on his back, and he will likely be at least 14 years old. There will be several adult females and their offspring, and occasionally there may be more than one adult male. Usually the adult males will leave the troop in search of forming their own, and will try to attract females to come with them, but if they stay, they may be a second in command after the silverback. The silverback is the one who decides where the group goes, where they forage for food, and he is the main protector. However, the younger males, the blackbacks, also help in protecting the entire family. What if they fought? These silverbacks are excellent at protecting the troops from threats in the African rainforests, but they've never seen the threat of the bear that is as white as ice, the polar bear. What would happen if a gorilla and a polar bear met and fought? Polar bears don't get too territorial with other polar bears, but they surely wouldn't like the sight of this big gorilla getting too close. They've never seen anything like this big ape. Most animals they see have flippers, and the ones with feet never walk on their hind legs. And the gorilla will be shocked by the sight of this white animal. He's never seen any bears. The closest thing he could relate this polar bear to is some type of humongous leopard, maybe. It's strength on strength as the pure white polar bear and the black-haired gorilla clash, creating a black and white image of violent swings and bites. The gorilla packs an impressive punch, and the range he covers with those arms is something the polar bear has never had to defend against. He's gone after walruses that use their girth and tremendous tusks to stave off attacks, but nothing has ever been able to swing a fist at him. and those fists do damage. However, as strong as the gorilla is, he is still outweighed by the polar bear. The polar bear has about 3 times the weight of the gorilla. He's muscular, not in the same way as the gorilla, but he's got power, able to drag weight 3 times his own weight. The polar bear can put the hurt on with vicious swipes from his paws, and he'd certainly use his weight to his advantage. Gorillas have had to defend against other gorillas, and sometimes have even been confronted by leopards and crocodiles, but never a massive bear over 1,000 pounds. This is a complicated task, and if the polar bear gets his mouth close enough to bite, watch out, because that bite is a force to be reckoned with. A polar bear's bite is comparable to that of a grey wolf, 1200 psi, one of the strongest in the animal kingdom. It makes sense seeing as how he is a carnivore and needs to be able to sink his teeth past blubber and thick skin. What doesn't make nearly as much sense is that the gorilla actually has a stronger bite, 1300 psi. He doesn't even eat meat, but if he needs to defend himself, his jaws can do serious damage. The gorilla's mouth is wide, but not quite as wide as the polar bear's mouth. The force is stronger, but the polar bear would have an easier time wrapping his larger mouth around a vulnerable body part and clamping down. Polar bears are skilled hunters, so that works to their advantage. However, gorillas are skilled fighters, having to do so within their troop if there is a challenger, or perhaps dealing with rival troops. If the gorilla could use his agility and lethal punches quickly, he could get the upper hand. He'd want to act fast and do serious damage to the polar bear right away, because the longer this fight went, the better advantage the polar bear would have. He's got the weight advantage, and each blow he delivers, whether with a big paw or a big bite, it weakens the gorilla. And then the polar bear can put his weight on the smaller ape. The polar bear, being much larger, has the advantage, but not an overwhelming one. Perhaps he'd win 60% of the time. The gorilla is too lethal, too strong, too agile to be ignored. It's the biggest ape versus the biggest bear, and it's a big fight. The biggest punches and the biggest bites. Whoever wins, we know for sure, the bigger they are, the harder they fall.